Listen up, because this might prove you've been wrong the whole time. If you are not attracting the women you desire, it is not primarily a matter of fate, genetics, or some external injustice stacked against you. It is, far more often, the direct consequence of your repeated behaviors, your unexamined habits, and the silent signals you continuously broadcast. Not who you are at your core, but what you consistently do. And until you confront that distinction with brutal honesty, nothing will meaningfully change. This is not comfort. This is a correction. You're about to hear 7 things you must get right if you're tired of being the nice guy who gets ignored, friend-zoned, or taken for granted. Because being nice isn't the problem. Being weak, predictable, and too eager is. If you actually want women to respect you, not just tolerate you, then pay attention, because most guys get this completely wrong. And after hearing these, you won't. 1. You must stop chasing, because although pursuit may feel instinctive, almost inevitable when confronted with someone you find attractive, the excessive, uncalibrated form most men engage in communicates not desire, but dependency. Every unanswered message you follow up on, every attempt to try harder in the face of indifference, subtly reinforces a single, deeply unattractive frame, that you are more invested in her attention than you are anchored in your own life. The Stoics understood that attachment to outcomes erodes inner stability. And when your emotional state becomes contingent on her response, you relinquish control over your own center of gravity. Attraction does not emerge from pursuit alone. It emerges from perceived value, and value cannot coexist with neediness. 2. You must exercise restraint in emotional disclosure. Modern advice often glorifies vulnerability without qualification, encouraging men to reveal themselves fully and immediately, as though transparency alone were a virtue independent of timing or context. But unfiltered exposure, especially in the early stages of interaction, does not signal depth. It signals a lack of calibration. Men like Marcus Aurelius did not suppress emotion. They governed its expression with precision. When you prematurely disclose your insecurities, your past wounds, or your inner turmoil, you collapse the natural progression of discovery, stripping away the intrigue and gradual unfolding upon which attraction quietly depends. Mystery is not deception, it is disciplined pacing. 3. You must abandon the need for validation, because the moment your sense of worth becomes entangled with her actions, her replies, her tone, her approval, you have already placed yourself in a subordinate psychological position. Validation seeking manifests in subtle yet unmistakable ways. Over-explaining your intentions, tailoring your personality to anticipated preferences, or performing rather than simply being. Epictetus articulated this with clarity. If you desire what is not within your control, you make yourself a servant to it. And a man who is governed by the need for approval cannot simultaneously project the independence that attraction requires. 4. You must stop being the guy who's always waiting around for her. Be less available. While responsiveness and reliability have their place, constant availability, instant replies, rearranged schedules, a life that appears to orbit hers, communicates not strength, but a lack of competing priorities. Value in both economic and social terms is inextricably linked to scarcity. If your time is always accessible, always offered, always waiting to be claimed, it ceases to feel valuable. A man whose life is full, genuinely full, not performatively so, does not need to manufacture scarcity. It arises naturally from his commitments, his ambitions, and his standards. 5. You must refuse to abandon your standards for the sake of acceptance. This is where many men, often unconsciously, negotiate against themselves, tolerating behavior they would otherwise reject, overlooking clear red flags, and suppressing their own boundaries in an attempt to preserve connection. But this strategy is self-defeating because the very act of compromising your standards in order to maintain interest erodes the foundation of respect upon which attraction depends. Even Niccolo Machiavelli, writing in a vastly different context, recognized that those who yield too easily forfeit authority in the eyes of others. If you do not enforce your boundaries, you teach others that there are none. 6. You must develop mastery over your emotional reactions, not by suppressing emotion entirely, but by refusing to become governed by its most impulsive expressions. When you react immediately to perceived threats, delayed responses, ambiguity, competition, you reveal instability, and instability undermines attraction at a fundamental level. Stoicism does not advocate coldness, it advocates control. The ability to remain composed, to pause rather than react, to interpret rather than assume. These are not merely philosophical ideals, but practical advantages in social dynamics. The man who cannot regulate his reactions is, by definition, predictable, and predictability at that level is rarely compelling. 7. You must abandon the illusion that attraction can be earned through disproportionate effort or material gestures. Excessive giving, whether in the form of gifts, favors, or relentless attention, often stems from an unspoken belief that interest can be negotiated, that desire can be cultivated through accumulation. But attraction does not operate on a transactional model. When your level of investment far exceeds the depth of the connection, it creates an imbalance that is felt, even if it is never explicitly acknowledged. And that imbalance rarely works in your favor. What becomes clear when you examine these patterns collectively is that the issue is not a lack of effort, but a misdirection of it. You have been taught, implicitly or explicitly, that doing more, giving more, trying more, accommodating more, will eventually produce the desired outcome. But in reality, it often produces the opposite, because attraction is less about accumulation and more about alignment. Alignment between your actions, your standards, your emotional discipline, and your sense of self. The Stoics did not seek to control others. They sought to master themselves. And in doing so, they became individuals whose presence carried weight, precisely because it was not contingent on external approval. So if you find yourself repeatedly frustrated, overlooked, or dismissed, resist the temptation to externalize the problem. Instead, examine your patterns with precision. Identify where you are overextending, where you are compromising, where you are reacting rather than choosing, and begin the far more difficult, but infinitely more rewarding process of correction. Because the moment you reclaim control over your behavior is the moment you stop chasing outcomes and start becoming someone outcomes gravitate toward. If this resonated with you, don't ignore it. Start implementing it today. Consider it your signal to finally become successful with women. Leave a like, subscribe, and dive into more content designed to push you toward real change. Thank you.